You know, there's a lot of clothing companies out there who make great, amazing products, but we don't always see them or hear about them. And then on the flip side of that, there are those brands that we do hear about and we see all the time on television and in ads, and their product really isn't that great. Sometimes it's just, fabric isn't great, or just the designs in general aren't good. Why is that? Well, it has a lot to do with marketing. The question is, as someone like you who's trying to start a clothing company, should you be more focused on marketing or the product? Let's discuss next here on Making the Brand. What's up, everybody? Rob Norman here from Planet Brooklyn Academy, and this is Making the Brand, the series where I give you a little insight and knowledge on how to create a clothing brand, and if you already have one, how to improve it. As always, before we jump into things, please hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can be up to date with everything we drop when they drop. So, marketing versus product. Which one is more important? So, when I first came into the fashion industry, an industry vet once told me that the success of a brand relies on 75% marketing and 25% product. Now, I do believe that is true because a lot of brands out today are successful because of marketing. But a lot of brands out there, like you guys who are just starting your clothing line, and even when I started, didn't have the money to do large-scale marketing. So does that mean you can't be successful? Well, no, it doesn't. But there is a certain formula to this. And let's just take, for example, and look at some examples to show you where the scale works. So take, for example, Trunk Fit. You remember this clothing line in the early 2010s. It was Lil Wayne's clothing company that he started. And this clothing line that he started was basically a mass streetwear line. And the funny thing about it was that Trunk Fit, no one knew what the name was about. People used to say truck fit, like it was a truck, and they did have a little logo that was like a truck. But Trunk Fit really had a meaning behind it, and it stood for the reason, that's what it was, the reason you kill for it. That's what Trunk Fit stood for. And I didn't know that at the time, and I'm pretty sure most people did it. But no one really cared, because when the brand was released, it was released at the height of streetwear, and the idea behind it was not to put out a good product. The idea behind it was to capitalize on the success of Wayne himself. He was at the top of his career, and creating a clothing line at that time was the smartest thing to do because all eyes was on him. The people who he partnered with to create the clothing line saw this, and this was basically a money grab. Money grab because this was a time that they knew that so many people were supporting him, following him. Everything Wayne touched at that time turned to gold. So quality was not something people were concerned with this line. It was basically, how do we take a line and mass it out to the public and make the most money off of it? Now, Trunk Fit was pretty much mirrored after Bape. It looked very similar. It had the same basically, elements behind it, but it was taking basically the concept or the aesthetics of Bape and moving it to a mass level where they can sell it to everybody. Now, again, Lil Wayne had an album out at the time. They were pushing it while he was on tour. He was doing all these press junkets, and he was wearing the stuff. All the major department stores were carrying it. This was not about quality, but everybody was buying it because who else was wearing it? Lil Wayne. So this was not about quality. This was about quantity and how much we can get out, because in actuality, when you think about it, most clothing brands that are, backed or the face of the brand is someone who is an artist, most of those brands do not last very long. There are exceptions to the rules. Sean John, for example, is still around. William Rask is still around. If you aren't aware of who William Rask clothing line is, which is mostly a denim line, and it's very well designed. Personally, when it came out, I loved it. But that clothing line alone is Justin Timberlake's clothing line. So it's still around, so is Sean John, and there are a few others that are around. But when you think about the mass market brands out there that are being used by artists, they kind of fall by the wayside after a while. And Wayne's line did just that. It fell by the wayside, pretty rapidly. So it had a rapid incline and a rapid decline. But again, this wasn't about building a line much like you guys want to do. You want to build a sustainable line. This was more about cash and grab. Now, let's look at things on the opposite end of the spectrum. There was once a brand called 55 DSL. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you may not know or have heard of 55 DSL. Well, 55 DSL was an experimental brand that came out of the house of Diesel. Yes, the jean company. And 55 DSL was created with the premise of becoming a streetwear line. Now, the brand was launched back in the mid 1990s. And the beauty of this brand was that streetwear wasn't really what it is today. It was still rooted in hip hop and, and skate and all of that, but streetwear wasn't fully developed yet. And this is where 55 DSL came out of. And it was built out of Italy. And they were about quality. I used to buy a lot of the pieces because I loved the quality of it, the fits, the colors. Everything was great about this brand. But there was no face behind it. There was nothing really pushing the brand. They did great collabs with the right people. But again, they were more about the quality of what they were putting out. And this is why this brand lasted for a while. It's not around much like Trunk Fit. It is no longer around. 55 DSL isn't around anymore, but they did have about a 20-year run doing this, which is pretty amazing considering that Trunk Fit didn't even survive a decade. But again, when we look at this brand that Diesel had, and eventually it would separate from Diesel and become its own entity, everything was about quality that they did. They weren't thinking about the marketing. Again, they did partner with the right people. So they basically prided themselves on what they can do and how well they did it. And they survived. Again, wasn't known by a lot of people. They were here in the States, even though they were based out of Italy. They did have stores here in the States, in North America, and they did fairly well. Again, I used to buy the items, and the price points were pretty high, and not over the top high, but high for the 90s, what was considered, pricey for a streetwear brand. They did have that price point, but still great quality. So you're looking at two different extremes of one is more product-based and one that's more marketing-based. So how does this apply to you? So when you're creating your clothing line, the things that you have to consider is, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a brand that's a flash in the pan, or are you trying to do longevity? And if you're trying to do longevity, when you think about the example I gave you of the 75-25, you got to think about how does that work for you? And that doesn't mean compromising quality to sacrifice your quality to make, jump into the marketing end of it. There is a way to balance this out. But there's something you have to understand. The average consumer, and when I say average, I mean Joe Schmo on the street, not fashionistas or people who are really into fashion. We're talking about the average consumer, the person who just randomly goes in the store and buys things. That person is focused on three elements and one key. The three elements when they look at a product is color, fit, and style. So when someone goes into a store, they see something, color normally catches their eye, then they look at the styling of it. And if those two get them, normally they try to fit. And if the fit is perfect, you pretty much have them. But then there's the fourth piece, the key. The key is that if the other three check, now the key is looking at the brand and seeing if there is some kind of connection between me and that brand. So if the brand believes in sustainability and they believe in saving the earth, and that's something I'm into, now all four boxes are checked. That customer is now into that brand. That's what we got to think about when we're creating things. We got to think about the three elements plus the key. Now, the key is the one that leans a little bit more towards marketing. And when you're creating your brand and you're looking at the 75-25, what you have to realize is that, again, you do not have to compromise on lessening your design of your product. But what you can do is look at how much. It's not quantity, but quality. So instead of doing what a lot of people do when they start a clothing company, they'll try to do, like 20, 30 styles they want to put out on the first time around. The problem is if you're a very anal person and you want the best designs and you're sitting there looking at, construction and you're looking at your colors and you want the colors to be just perfect and you want the labeling to be done a certain way and you're really focused on the product, when it comes to marketing, you're not going to have enough time. And this is why brands like brands who are really into their product don't do or get out as much in the public eye because you spend so much time on just the product, you never think about the marketing. But if you shrink the line when you're first coming out and say, let's focus on 6 to 12 pieces and make those 6 to 12 pieces really tight and really good, you won't spend so much time and hours into, focusing on a bigger line. You now have time to look at your marketing, focusing on the key. So now you can market those 6 and 12 pieces to that crowd or that target audience you want. And remember, target audience, something I mentioned in my previous videos and something I will continue to mention to you going forward. Target audience is so key. So when you have those key 6 to 12 pieces, you can now go over and work on your marketing for that, and you can build it. So eventually you can get an even scale between your marketing and product. And once you have that audience of people following you, you now can ramp up your product because now they're familiar with your brand. And now as you put more marketing into that, now you can increase the amount of product you're doing. So that's how that 75-25 can really work for you, because you don't have to think about lessening your product design, just lessen the amount, put the same focus into it, but now you have more time to focus on the marketing of it and get it out there. And like I said, we're in this game for longevity. We're not trying to be a flash in the pan. You don't want to be a trunk fit. You want to be something that is around for a while and that you can continue to build on. And again, we're in this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you got to take your time going at this. So again, think about that when you are creating your clothing companies. Think about that 75-25. Keep that in mind. You want to make sure that you put enough into your designs and then be able to roll that over into your marketing to hit your target audience. That's it for this episode. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Again, if anything I said resonated with you, please hit that like button. If you have any questions or any thoughts or comments, please leave that in the comment section below. We make new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. So until then, I'll catch you guys later. Peace.